concerning the water distribution service truck, and would move to add that to the report of municipal officers and municipal department section, and also ordinance 2022-131, which deals with the water distribution service truck, and adding that to the legislation, and that is all in a motion.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding the two items to tonight's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are added. We have no proclamations. We have no retirement recognitions or resolutions. We do have two petitions.
The status of the Martic Investments annexation, just to let you know that the time has lapsed that we can do, and it went to city planning and zoning for the acceptance and approval of it, as well as the rezone.
Questions or comments? Petition to be filed.
Received a zoning amendment request for 0 Greendale Avenue for parcel number 2100010329996 from First United Church of Christ located at 2100 Greendale Avenue to change the zoning to O1 offices and institutions. It's currently zoned R1 residential.
Questions or comments? This will be referred to City Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning Committee. We have 4 oral communications. I'm going to call on you as submitted to me. First, we'd like Jack Raymond, who lives at 1330 South Main Street, and he'd like to talk about the zoning issue of McPherson. I understand you only have 4 minutes. At the end of 4 minutes, I'll gavel you, and then we'll discuss your options at that time.
All right, thank you. Is it on? I know they said the last time that it was so loud that they couldn't record it. I've risen to repeat some of the issues that I have indicated, but I'd like to begin with my ending and then go from there. My ending is a pretty one-sentence issue. And it's this: would you like to have a McDonald's next to your house? My statement itself is a rerun of several of the issues that have been raised here. First one, I would request that the city perform a traffic and safety study that would give us a real basis to talk about what happens to the traffic pattern if we put a McDonald's in that space. The second was we have a local neighborhood. It extends quite extensively up Main Street and down the side streets, and we see the high traffic continuation as a serious problem. The people who have asked to install the McDonald's, I've made a point of going to see their restaurants, and their restaurants are well kept as a restaurant. The problem is not at the restaurant. It's people drive through the drive-through, which is the majority of sales, and they have then no control over what the people who have those materials in their cars do with them. So we're concerned with the trash issue. There has been a request, as you know, to rezone a 119 West McPherson. We see that as the possibility of eroding the property value for the next 13 residences on that street, on the south side of that street. We also see what happens when corporate interests get a hold of residential property immediately across the street where there are 2 essentially abandoned houses. We're concerned that the nature of our properties will be significantly altered if you are a person who is familiar with Main Street of Findlay, you'll know that people sit on their front porches and greet their neighbors. And they do this generally after 5 o'clock in the evening. And all of a sudden, our 5 o'clock until 11 o'clock will be absolutely disturbed. So we are concerned about that. I am concerned that we have an interest in our city in commercial property, and I am generally in favor of commercial development. But the C1 inclusions have been put there as service to residential areas, not to general commerce. McDonald's restaurants are as close to general commerce as you can possibly get. They are based upon the idea that the traffic is large. Thank you. Don't have to.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Second is Tony, and hopefully I pronounce your last name, Coyne? Yes. Okay. 1001 Lakeside Avenue, I assume is that in Findlay?
It's in Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland, Ohio?
Sunny Cleveland, Ohio.
And he wants to speak on the zoning amendment and understand the same rules apply.
Absolutely. And I appreciated Mr. Jack's comments. We've talked in the hallway. We have a fundamental disagreement, but it's a great country when you can civilly disagree with people. But I want to get the facts out here very clearly and simply state, our request is for reconsideration of the zoning amendment, number one. Number two, if not, we'd request that the Planning and Zoning Committee of Council keep the zoning amendment request on the table and that this council not take action, give us at least 30 days. I must say it's important that we recognize there are two issues here. The zoning amendment would change the zoning to C1. And it's a 38-foot wide parcel. Dr. Bateson bought the property, is invested in the corner with her dental office, and has also purchased the old Fifth Third Bank building. We're asking that the zoning be consistent in that location. When you go west on McPherson, there's a hodgepodge of land uses. It's not all pristine single-family zoning. It's just not. You have some multifamily zoning, you have several commercial parcels, you have several non-conforming commercial parcels that are being used. You have an AT&T service facility, you have a substation, and you have a large church property. So I'm just asking that it stay on the table at least so that we could further have a dialogue and have some transparency. Because I feel, as a representative of one of the applicants, Epic, which owns the property, McDonald's is a separate story, I'll get to that in 1 second, that we've been kind of railroaded from the start of this. There's been a lot of prejudgment without facts, and I don't think that's fair. And I think that the rezoning makes a ton of sense. Whether or not McDonald's is ever approved, the rezoning makes a ton of sense for this community to create jobs, economic development, and improve that part of the neighborhood. As it relates to McDonald's, we haven't filed anything and had any feedback on McDonald's professionally and with any kind of due diligence. None. We haven't shown you elevations, we haven't shown you landscaping, we haven't shown you formal plans other than concept plans that were asked to be submitted. And I don't think it's fair to prejudge something before you've seen it, before it's gone through due diligence. Good zoning should follow a land use plan. Your current one for this part of Findlay is outdated. So we're here to ask that you give serious consideration to continue tabling the matter until we could do some further due diligence. You know, when you look what's on the C1 zoning, it provides for other uses, not just restaurants. It provides for other retail uses that are not insignificant. And I want to just point out that the C1 zoning allows retail, bakeries, bookstores, coffee shops, convenience stores, dry cleaners, and somehow we're being penalized because of the speedway across the street. I don't think that's fair. You want reinvestment in your city. We've had a couple of rumors about, well, we might look at rezoning it to office. One of the deadest uses right now across this country. And not only that, there are deed restrictions on the property. You can't have insurance offices there, you can't have finance offices there, you can't have a bank on that property. There are deed restrictions. So if you want to keep the Batesons from reinvesting, that would be a good move, to rezone it to office. So again, we're asking that we have a dialogue, be transparent, discuss the C1 zoning just for what's in the C1 zoning, and then take a vote at the appropriate time. McDonald's is a separate issue down the road. Somehow that's taken over the discussion. And we think that it's important that that not be the case. So I respectfully request you either reconsider the action on the rezoning, or that you at least keep it on the table so that we can have further discussion and dialogue on the uses. And I say that on behalf of Dr. Angie Bateson, on behalf of Epic, and also on behalf of McDonald's. It is interested in reinvesting in your city. And I note, we have an opportunity to put in a special restaurant there with a local operator that's well-respected in this community. With that, I'd ask you for your indulgence to at least keep the matter on the table. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Mr. Baumann?
So, I guess I would not, just blanket statement before we get to the question, I would not be in favor of tabling this committee report. I would suggest that we let it die here tonight. But to my question, so if I'm to understand your comments, Mr. Coyne,
Yes.
you want us to kind of take pity because you showed your hand and included the McDonald's site plan with your request. And once it becomes submitted and it becomes public record. So yes,
Right.
you showed your hand.
But we were transparent. I didn't show my hand. We were transparent. There's never been a response from any professional with this city about it.
It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to the citizens.
It's up to this body.
Which
You're elected. You're elected. Right. That's
I
right.
represent the citizens.
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, I just don't buy it. Sorry.
And again, I'd like you to separate the two, because the C1, it doesn't mean you're going to have McDonald's there for sure. It just doesn't.
That's exactly what it means. You represent McDonald's, sir.
We also have an interest with Dr. Bateson's investment on that corner. And their attorney, who I'm working with on this matter, is in the same position, and they would request that it be tabled as well, because that zoning change to C1 would serve this community well.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I'll just say that again. I don't buy it. My constituents don't buy it. No.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Coyne.
Thank you.
Our third is Sharon Sills, 7908 Morse Road in New Albany, Ohio. She'd like to speak about the same.
I would like to pass on speaking. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's fine. Then fourth would be Kathy Weingart, 204 Green Lawn, and she wanted to speak if Tony spoke.
Thank you, and I don't mean to reiterate for those who've heard me before. I just wanted to emphasize that there was a tabled motion from the first meeting by Tony Coyne, or by the team for Tony Coyne, so that he would have time to come up with a traffic study. We had numerous citizens, tons of petitions signed. Everybody was here ready to hear him speak, and he did not show up at the last meeting. I want you to know that. To emphasize what he says and what he does, we're seeing the true light of what's happening here. As my husband read at the last meeting last week at the planning meeting, the ordinance is adopted for the purpose of promoting and protecting the public health, safety, peace, comfort, convenience, and general welfare. We're talking about the city planning code. By protecting and conserving the character, social, and economic stability of the residential, commercial, industrial, and other areas by securing the most appropriate use of land, by preventing overcrowding of the land and undue congestion of population, by providing adequate light, air, and reasonable access, and by facilitating adequate and economical provision of transportation, water, sewers, schools, recreation, and other public requirements, and by all means, all in accordance with the City of Findlay Land Use Plan. The Findlay Land Use Plan is here by law for you as elected officials to adhere to and to protect what is here for the citizens, as we have talked about. And I just urge you to really listen to what the commission has, the city planning said unanimously, and last week the city and zoning has said unanimously, and what Mr. Russell has led us forward to emphasize what the city citizens are saying about our lovely neighborhood. Thank you, and I hope you really deny this effort here. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Sorry, questions or comments? Thank you. Oh, sorry, there is one. Mr. Niemeyer.
I just have a comment. Something's gonna go there, it's a matter of time. So I don't know, you're just gonna have to live with it. That's my opinion.
It seems like the general opinion is we want to maintain that corner as a C1, and that commercial creep will exactly happen to the neighborhood. He can show red-colored zoning maps as much as he wants, but if you bring up the zoning map, I wish that map was up here today, it's residential. Sure, we have an AT&T place there. They come during the day, they leave during night. You don't even hear them, they're quiet. A church is always on the edge of a neighborhood. That is okay too. Substation, we know what that means. There's not anything going on there. It's a quiet residential area. And he's also forgetting entirely about what's on the north side of McPherson, the whole entire neighborhood. And Google Findlay. What do you find on Visit Findlay? One of the very first things you see is South Main Street and all the tours, all the maps of how to walk the walking neighborhood. That is what strategic planning is, what you're doing with Findlay Forward planning right now. You want to emphasize what makes the charm of this town. You can read the letter that's in your packet tonight that I sent about that. I really urge you to think about what the citizens want for this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other oral communications this evening. Written communications.
An email from Kathy Wengant regarding rezoning of McPherson home.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
City income tax monthly collections report for October 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental activities report for October 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department activities report for October 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court activities report for October 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Prague Carryout LLC doing business as Eagle Creek Drive-Through located at 902 Blanchard Avenue for a C1 and C2 liquor permit. A check of the record show no criminal current record.
Ms. Frishy.
I'll make a motion that no objections be filed.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. There will be no objection.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Shiv Baba Incorporated doing business as 5K Carryout located at 1790 East Melrose Avenue for a C1 and C2 liquor permit. A check of the record show no current criminal record.
Ms. Frishy.
I'll make a motion that no objections be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Summary financial reports for October 31st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Income Tax Board minutes of August 3rd and October 10th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Reservoir Transfer Line Rehab, project number 35782800, Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Grant.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Oh, Ms. Frishy.
When I read it, did we already pass legislation to go out and apply for that grant? And it,
Yes.
I just-
Yeah, this was last year. We were awarded the money last year. I've never appropriated the money in, but working with the auditor's office, we kind of want to get that money appropriated in, the grant money appropriated into the project prior to the end of the year. We're ready to bid. We're just waiting on the valves to come in, but we
I
just don't have
thought we
delivery date.
usually appropriate to the project. That's why I felt like it was backwards, but that's not.
Yep, we're just getting them in.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Traffic Commission minutes of October 17th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Parks and Recreation Board minutes of October 17th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Treasurer's Reconciliation Report for October 31st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Planning Commission Staff Report for November 10th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Add-on letter for City Engineer Kalb regarding water distribution service truck waiving a formal bid process.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
So Jeremy, was the truck that we originally were hoping to purchase in 2022-017 under the 50,000 threshold? Is that what I'm understanding?
So the original truck was on a state contract for 22, but we were not able to get one of the 22 allocations. So we're now into the 23-year phase. The money was already appropriated, but the current truck they are wanting was not part of a state bid. We were given a state bid price for a truck that is comparable, and that was $66,000 and some change. And Reineke Ford has given us a price of $52,000. So since it was now on state bid, we need to waive the bidding process.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
What's the specialty truck we need for water?
It's a F-350 four-door long bed, and it will have a utility bed on it. It's one of their service trucks. Just with the state bid, that's not what was bid out, like the four-door long bed with the utility bed. It's just a standardized truck.
Was this in our capital planning for this year?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was.
And the money was appropriated, I think it was ordinance 17, I believe.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
The Water and Sewer Committee met on November 9th, 2022 to discuss restricted funds for both the Water and Sewer Departments. City Auditor Stashak presented to the committee concerning existing water pollution control and water restricted funds, and also presented new language for proposed new restricted funds for water and water pollution control. The committee will have further meetings concerning this subject.
Ms. Frishy.
Motion to approve the committee report.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor that the committee report be accepted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted.
The Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Philip L. Rooney and Ranzel Ltd. on behalf of Mardic Investments Incorporated to rezone the property to be annexed to the City of Findlay, Ohio as M2 multifamily high density. The property is located in the southwest quarter of Section 36, Township 2, Range 10 East, currently in Allen Township. We recommend approval as requested.
Ms. Frishy.
Move for approval.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The committee report is accepted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Anthony Coyne and Diane Colta, attorneys for the applicant Collaborations LLC to rezone 119 West McPherson Avenue from R2 medium lot residential to C1 local commercial. This request was tabled during the October 13th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. We recommend to deny in light of strong public opposition because the proposed expands commercial creep into residential, because changing zoning to commercial from residential further threatens the intended use of this area as laid out in the land use plan.
Mr. Baumann.
I make a motion, we accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Ms. Frischie.
Don, I'm glad you're back. I'm sure you missed me. I have a question for you. You don't have to get up if you want to yell for me, that's fine. I remember coming onto council, there were rules about abstaining from a vote if you had direct interest in it. Can you refresh me on what are the reasons to abstain from a vote? So direct correlation or interest in that. So would you consider that if you lived on South Main or in the South Main corridor that you should not be voting on that committee report because it would be a conflict because it's a direct impact to those council members? I'm talking about this planning and zoning committee report to deny the rezone. So Grant Russell obviously lives on South Main, and so does and Councilman Slough lives in that vicinity. Do we consider that a conflict of interest because it directs it affects their properties and they have a direct impact?
Voting on it, that'd be different.
So even though I guess I just want to say I feel like that is a conflict because you're voting on a neighborhood issue that you have impact on your property values. So I feel like that's a gray area. I was surprised that we untabled this legislation because I thought we were tabled to allow time to have the petitioners rebut the concerns of the citizens in the neighborhood. I was there for most of the meeting. I was not able to be there for the vote. I had to be there someplace else, and I was not planning for that long of a meeting, so I apologize. But I did try to ask one of the speakers, as Councilman Niemeyer said, it is zoned R1 on that corner, and I think everything is getting mixed when we're talking about the McPherson side and that 37 foot wide parcel. And I was wanting to know from the citizens what they would accept in that neighborhood for the C1. The biggest concern was traffic was the concern, and the traffic that a potential drive-through could bring. And then the aesthetics was kind of the other thing that I got there. I feel like we shouldn't be accepting this committee report at this time. It should be tabled because if we do accept it, it ends all their discussion. And when we also have to look at a property owner who invests in our community for a piece of property that is zoned C1, I think those traffic counts would be important for anything going in there. I would like to see those types of information, that fact. The gentleman, Mr. Romick, he did bring some studies from ODOT and someplace else in other areas to try to give us some comparison, which I appreciated that. But I don't feel like we should have untabled this without giving them the time if they wanted to rebut the community's concern of having a McDonald's there. Plus, we have the muddying of the water with the property owner. So I won't support accepting the committee report because of the gray area with Grant and Mr. Slough, and then the fact that I think we need to give them their opportunity if they want to give it, and if they don't, it dies at the end of the year as being a tabled piece of committee report.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
I'll just speak to the fact that Ms. Frishy thinks that a council person could not vote on something that was in their ward. That would completely eliminate every ward councilman voting on anything that was happening in their ward. If you're looking at this from the standpoint that a council person has a specific interest in their neighborhood, that's why they got elected.
Mr. Baumann.
Would you be interested in calling the question?
Let me ask Ms. Frishy.
So, Jeff, I think you're misunderstanding me representing your ward. When you have property and live that area, I think you're in a great area because it's benefiting you personally. The biggest concerns that were brought up were property value, trash, things like that. And that is why I say that I think it should be an abstaining vote. That's it. It's not if they lived on the other end of town.
Mr. Baumann.
Dare I say, just to echo Mr. Wopser, that's exactly why they're on council, to represent their neighbors.
Ms. Frishy.
You're not on council for your own benefit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. And I'm sorry, say again. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
2 nay. Okay.
Per my, it looked like there were 2 nays. Committee report is adopted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from James Bowser, owner of Performance R&D LLC, to vacate Bolton Street from Barnett Street South to the dead end. We recommend approval of the vacation request and to put in a utility easement for the city of Findlay.
Mr. Russell.
There is an error on the committee report, and the error is mine, of my doing. The vote was 3-2 in favor of the in favor of the application. The 2 nay votes were myself and Brian Baumann. The 3 votes in the affirmative were Councilwoman Frishy, Councilman Slough, and Councilman Hellman. It was my error in marking them, mixing Jim and Brian, and would like the committee report to be modified to reflect my error and the fact that Brian definitely voted nay and Jim definitely voted in favor.
To accept it.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Is that the way we want to do it?
I'm not sure if we do or don't, but rather we do it and not need it than
Kind of
not
just
need
a
it and not
statement
do
of
it.
fact, but I can make it a motion.
Agreement on council and the parties to the report, we can amend it.
So all those in
So-
favor that
So
the-
it would be a motion to amend the committee report to
all
reflect
those in favor of the amendment as discussed, say aye.
that. Do we want to,
Do
Any-
we need a second?
do we want a second?
Yeah, Mr. Baumann, second. Back to all those in favor of amending the committee report as discussed, say aye. Any opposed, nay. It is amended. Ms. Frishy.
Amended.
Second, Mr. Slough. Any further discussion? Mr. Russell.
I voted in opposition to this request for a few reasons. Number one, City Planning Commission voted 5-0 to deny the request. When we, as on Planning and Zoning, go against City Planning's recommendation, we generally should have some pretty strong reasons to do so. I did not see them at this time. The reason for the increased use of Bolton Street was because of the applicant's own hand. The multi-use trail that dead ends that he mentions brings people to the area. It dead ends at his property. That is why he's currently in a court case with the county to allow the trail to traverse his property. And so when folks are on the trail, their path to exit the trail is to go up the section of Bolton Street that we are talking about vacating. You know, and additionally, That section of Bolton provides access to the west side of Swale Park and to the trail. It provides access to a kind of a major park in the center of town, and it's one that the city expressed desire to maintain that access. Hancock Regional Planning recommended maintaining of that access, and therefore I voted in opposition. I would ask that the rest of City Council deny this or vote against this committee report.
Mr. Baumann?
I guess I would just echo Grant's comments there. There's obviously utilities that go down the middle of that street that we have an interest in having access to. And city personnel use that access point to access the park there. It's obviously an important, I guess it boils down to why would we give a public street away? That doesn't make sense.
Ms. Frischi?
So the reason that I voted in favor with the other two gentlemen on the committee to approve that committee report was the applicant followed the process and all abutting properties were in agreement because he was all of the abutting properties. I think there was 5 parcels. I asked Matt Corday, I said, is the city of Findlay considered an abutting property? Basically, you're in a gray area because you're making the decision. And you have 1 vote versus 5. So we talked about that a little bit. Grant talks about the bike path ending. This property owner talked about homeless people living down in there, having problems with arson on his property, having problems with people driving down to the dead end of it, and then actually driving their vehicles on the bike path. So 4-wheelers, golf carts, motorcycles, whatever it might be, trash and so forth. The city did go out after that committee meeting and they mowed the ditch up and cleaned that up, which was helpful, in cleaning up some needles and some other things going on in there. Grant talks about having access to the park. There are multiple locations for access to that park. I would also like to point out on the record, we do have that catalytic plan that we have all seen over the last year or two. And in that catalytic plan, that area that is owned by the city is looking at being redeveloped for housing. So we're not talking about parks, in my opinion. We're talking about putting housing down in there as a potential. So the give and take with regards to the utility easement, because there is a water line that runs under there, is putting an easement in place. They have no problem with that. They just want to stop the traffic and secure their property, and I see no reason to eliminate their safety and not address their concerns.
Ms. Mayor?
I would just like to make a point of clarification that the city is an abutting property owner, and we did not sign off on the petition. Additionally, in the conversations with the property owner at City Planning Commission, each of the issues he brought up had not been really brought up to the appropriate parties. So one of his big issues was folks getting onto his property. We have talked to him about putting a fence up to address that, which would be able to be done without this vacation. Because of the width of the road and the vacation and how that would have to occur, because we would need a 40-foot easement, many of the issues that he's bringing up would not be able to be addressed by that. He's not going to be able to block it off entirely. He's not going to be able to put a fence in that roadway. So I definitely feel for him, and I think that, going out and cleaning the ditch, helping him with no trespassing signs, talking about getting a fence, those are all going to be able to better address the issues than simply giving away this public roadway that is utilized for a purpose. Additionally, one item that he mentioned was at least one of his parcels that he owns that is currently not developed along that area would not have any frontage for future development. So that's obviously not a problem now because he owns them and he is maintaining them. But if he at any point in the future wanted to sell those properties, they're undevelopable because they would not have a roadway. So from a planning perspective, I think it's bad practice to vacate the roadway.
Mr. Baumann? Mr. Niemeyer?
At 4 o'clock today, there was a road closed sign up out there.
Ms. Mayor?
He has placed that there as part of his issues, trying to get away from traffic. So we can look at putting some sort of barriers and signage to help with some of the traffic going onto the pathways, but it is a public road.
Ms. Frishy?
You brought up, Mayor, that the city is a budding property owner. That was addressed in our committee. The standard practice is if not all abutting property owners are 100% in support, that the petitioner has the option of advertising 6 times and going that route. But they are 5 of the parcels, we are 1, and then we are also looking at it. Can you talk to the point of the catalytic plan and what things are being discussed over there? Because I know you also have that lawsuit happening in the county with regards to the bike path. So if you can touch base on a little bit of all of that, that would be great.
So the process, yes, as you are correct, that you would have to be responsible for advertising it. When you are looking at properties similar to an annexation, it's based off of the number of owners, not the number of parcels. So in this case, you have 2 impacted property owners. So the city did not approve it. He followed the proper process. I'm not arguing that. I was just point of clarification. Related to the catalytic plan, no, there's no plans over there. We have done this as flood mitigation. The goal is to keep this as flood mitigation, and there are no other plans at this time.
So what do you see the need for the road then for?
Because it provides public access to a public park, and it's good planning. It allows for if he wants to sell his property and somebody wants to build on it, I think that it can still be utilized. I don't think that the issues he's brought up are solved by vacating the roadway.
Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that I initially had voted in favor of the vacation of this. I've gone out and visited the site twice since then, listening to some of the other comments and arguments and the fact that there's some legal issues going on with that area with the property owner. I guess I have changed my attitude on this, and I'm not in favor of that and would disapprove the vacation.
Mr. Wobser?
Just a quick point of clarification, Mr. President. If the committee report is approved, we already have ordinance 2022-130 on the record, on the agenda tonight. It was the first reading of this vacation proposal. If this gets voted down, so if we do not approve the committee report, does that automatically take out that ordinance?
My understanding, the ordinance would stand irregardless of what the committee report would be.
So we still will have a
I would
chance,
defer
we'll still
that
need
to
to.
our law director, but that's my understanding.
Is that correct? Yes. So it will stay there, even if the committee report's voted down?
Right. Mr. Russell?
Then Don, my question is why is there legislation on the table until the committee report's been accepted by the council that would indicate that we would have a need for legislation? I believe that the legislation is premature.
If they kill the report.
Yes, it could be moved if they kill the report.
Would you speak up so the council could hear what you said?
It could kill the request if
So it's my understanding, let me make sure I understood, that if the Planning and Zoning Committee their report is not accepted, right? Because their motion is to recommend approval. So if it's not accepted, the ordinance dies or it remains.
It remains.
So the committee report recommends that it's approved. Okay? Irregardless, it was recommended that it was approved. even though Mr. Hellman's indicated that he would probably vote different at this point in time. But it was approved at committee, right? If council then votes on the committee report, and it is, the committee report is either approved or not approved. If it's not approved, does the ordinance die? Obviously, if it's approved, the ordinance would remain. So, okay. Does everybody understand that? Ms. Frishy? Ms. Frishy?
Okay, I thought Dennis said that he didn't I thought Dennis said he didn't understand, like I had a question, so I was waiting, but you're okay?
Okay.
Okay,
We'll address
so-
my confusion after your.
So my question being, I always understood all property owners get a vote, but the mayor says it's 1-to-1, so that's fine. So if we deny the committee report, that denies them the option to advertise 6 times to move this legislation forward, where if we accept the committee report, it starts the legislation, right?
I think your question as to whether he has options, if it's denied, those options are separate and not equal to that decision.
Well, but it would deny, if there's a possibility of denying this committee report, then where does it leave the citizen is what I'm trying to understand. Because if we would have told them they could have advertised 6 times, paid that fee, and seen where it came out at to get it passed, where should that have happened at?
I think
Because
your-
we eliminate it.
I
when we
think
did-
your question is a little bit moot, only because the committee report is not legislation. It is just a committee report. It would, hang on, let me answer the question, or let me make my comment before you interrupt me. So that would give him the option, if the committee report is denied, right, or not accepted, that would not eliminate any of his options, including the advertising. All it does is, it just says that the committee does not accept it. If it was legislation and then it went down for, and not approved, then that other than being passed on the majority, it would give him the option then of petition and such like that if it wasn't a super majority. You understand what I'm trying to say?
No. And
No,
I
you
guess
don't look like you do.
No, because I feel like usually that happens either in planning commission, gives them they tell them they could advertise for bid, but they denied it there. We approved it in our committee, but if we deny the committee report, everything's done for him. Is that not true, Don? Or Mayor, or we're first?
My comment is it's not done for him, and that's my comment. Any other discussion from council? I was just going to say that. Thank you for interrupting. We're waiting on a decision from the,
Denise, can you clarify when the advertising is necessary? Is it before it goes to City Planning Commission as part of the public notice, or is it during the legislation process?
Well, vacations don't require a public hearing unless all abutting property owners have not signed. After the first reading is when I put out the public notice. It's supposed to be after the first reading. So that would be tomorrow, I would put it out.
So to answer your question, Councilwoman Frishy, and we can certainly follow up on this to confirm, but based off of my consultation with the law director and Denise's statements, the advertising would have been done in conjunction with the legislation. So by the committee denying the request, the legislation would be pulled because really it shouldn't have been on the agenda until the committee report was adopted anyways. And in this case, there would be no need for the advertising because it's not moving forward in the process.
So it eliminated their option to advertise because they weren't notified that they had to advertise before it went to Planning Commission?
Because they don't need to at that point in the process. They only need to notify if it's moving forward in the legislative process.
So when do they implement that not all abutting property owners are in agreement that they can advertise for bid? I'm not.
That would be if the legislation moved forward, which in this case it sounds that it may not.
If the legislation
No, you're notifying the properties that, hey, I'm moving forward, even though you don't want me to move forward, come and speak your piece. In this case, because that would not be an opportunity for them, council is addressing it.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Oh, Mr. Baumann?
Were Jeff's comments in the form of a motion? Or is that something you're interested in?
Sorry, I don't remember what your comments were.
Well, if the, Brian, I understand, it sounds to me, and one more time, if this is voted down, the legislation goes away. Am I correct in that, Mr. President? So no, it's not a motion. We'll just go to a vote for the committee report, and that will determine the fate of the legislation.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
This is to approve as amended?
This is just approval. As amended. So I have 3 ayes. All those opposed?
Aye. Or
Gotta
nay.
do a roll call, probably.
And we're going to do a roll call.
Mr. Ballman,
Nay.
Ms. Frishy,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Nay.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
May the force be with you. Mr. Russell,
Nay.
Mr. Slough, Ms. Warnicki, and Mr. Wopser.
Nay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nay.
The committee report is not adopted. Legislation. We will start with resolutions.
Second reading for Resolution 31, 2022. A resolution transferring funds within appropriated funds and declaring an emergency.
Ordinances.
Third reading for Ordinance 2022-111. An ordinance authorizing the auditor to make payroll deductions for those employees who have elected to enroll in the health savings account plan and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I have moved for adoption of ordinance 2022-111.
Second, Ms. Frishy. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Sorry. Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Ms. Frishy,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wopser.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-112. An ordinance amending 3 sections of codified ordinance number 2022-81 as amended, known as the salary ordinance of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and repealing all other parts of ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hellman.
A move to approve ordinance 2022-112.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy,
Nay.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki, Mr. Wopser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-113, an ordinance approving the request of the administrative judge of the municipal court of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to grant an additional 15% salary increase for the clerk of municipal court position, which would exceed the allotted 8% of current codified ordinance 2022-81 as amended of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as a salary ordinance, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I had moved for adoption of ordinance 2022-113.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion? Ms. Frishy.
Mayor, I don't know if you had the breakdown of that. I didn't have a chance to email Mr. Beach. I know there was 3 positions. The other 2 were under the 8%, and this one was at 15%, and they weren't eliminating that position when Jeff asked at the first reading. I was just curious what the other 2 percentages were.
I do not have that breakdown. I apologize. I would, however, just reiterate what the judge shared at the last time. It's still within the bounds of the position. and within the salary ordinance. So though it is above the 8%, which is allowed by ordinance, it is still within the bounds of the position as a whole.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy.
Nay.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-118, an ordinance vacating a portion of alley between West McPherson Avenue and Lake Cascades Parkway, formerly Vance Avenue, east of Douglas Parkway, abutting the Sherman Addition Block G, and in lots number 16815 through 16822, hereinafter referred to as the 119 West McPherson Avenue vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio. That was the third reading.
Ms. Frishy,
Move for approval.
second Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-120 as amended. And an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 3, GMP3, with Klaus Construction Corporation for interior building, foundation, concrete, masonry, mezzanine, and overhead doors for the Strict Center project, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer,
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-120 as amended.
second Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance as amended say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-121, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-123, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the resurfacing of Bright Road from Fostoria Avenue to Production Drive, project number 3282200, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-124, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell,
Jeremy, I seem to remember from a conversation that said that there was some interest in moving this one along because of lead times or something. I'm not 100% sure I got the recall, or maybe, Chief, maybe that'd be directed to you. I mean, so the basic question is timeline on this, not need or necessity.
It would be nice, it's not 100% necessary to do second and third reading tonight. It would be nice because part of this appropriation is to allow us to buy a snowplow for that utility truck. And the sooner we can get our new utility trucks in service, one of the outdated trucks we're actually going to transfer to another department. So the quicker we can get the new ones in service, the quicker we can make that transfer as well. So we'll be ready to go in the snowplows.
So do you know something about snow that you're not telling us?
I watch the same forecast
step
that you
away.
do, so I hope we don't need it soon. So it's up to you, but it would be helpful.
any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, next.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-125, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract with Strand Associates Incorporated for the flow monitoring and data collection portion of the Water Pollution Control Center Long-Term Control Plan Amendment, project number 356-26200, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-126, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First, first reading for ordinance 2022-127, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-128, an ordinance accepting and approving an application for the annexation of territory situated in the township of Allen, County of Hancock, State of Ohio, and being a part of Section 36, Township 1, Township 2 North, Range 10 East, a tract of land consisting of 3.978 acres of land more or less, hereinafter referred to as the Mardic Investments Incorporated annexation. First reading for ordinance 2022-129, an ordinance amending Chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by zoning the following described property as M2 multifamily high density, hereinafter referred to as the Mardic Investments Incorporated annexation. First reading for ordinance 2022-130, an ordinance vacating a certain portion of an alley.
Sorry, point of order, this is not under consideration due to the fact that the committee report was not accepted.
Sorry. First reading for add-on ordinance 2022-131, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to waive the formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract with Reineke Ford Lincoln Incorporated for the purchase of a new service truck and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
And once again, Jeremy, on this one, I thought for sure you wanted this moved so we could ensure that we were getting this, or getting on the list for this, correct?
Yeah, correct. So their ordering will start November 21st. It's going to stop sometime in middle of December, but talking with Ford, they said it could stop at any time. So they could call next week on Friday and say, we're not taking any orders. So we want to secure that before we lose an allocation.
Mr. Russell.
You know, because this money was allocated for a truck in 22-017, and I mean, I understand the issue. I think it's kind of unique. I generally don't like to suspend rules on add-on legislation, but it is a unique situation with a unique time frame. Therefore, I'd make a motion that we waive council's statutory rules and ordinance 2022-131 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspending the rules of council, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough? Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? And Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give ordinance 2022-131 its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-131, ordinance 2022-131.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-131.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough? Aye. Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Old business. Mr. Russell.
I would ask for a reconsideration of 2022-124. That's the Findlay Fire Department pickup truck, additional accessories.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor that that ordinance be reconsidered, say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. It will be reconsidered. Mr. Russell.
I've learned not to laugh in the face of Mother Nature, and if we get 2 feet of snow, I don't want to be blamed. But more importantly, we have an asset, this truck, that isn't being utilized because we don't have accessories. It seems like a pretty minor request, and Chief Eberly had spoken in favor of doing this, so I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-124 be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-124.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-124.
second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Bowman,
Aye.
Ms. Frishy,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
The ordinance is adopted. Any other old business? New business? I have one real quick, and then there's United Way pledge cards on the council office table. If you would like to consider a donation to United Way through the city of Findlay, please pick one of those, fill it out, and return it. Thank you. Mr. Stashek.
Real quick, I know it's been a long meeting for you. Just a reminder that your state mandated training that we get audited on every year for ethics, open meetings, and public records. I'd like to see if we could get some certificates. I haven't received any so far, so friendly reminder, everybody. And enjoy Thanksgiving if I don't see you.
Other new business? The mayor has requested that we adjourn to executive session. It's my understanding there will be no other, sorry. I'm sorry. It's my understanding there will be no other city council business. Once we adjourn, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive council. Mr. Russell?
I make
Second.
a motion that we adjourn into executive session to discuss a property matter.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned.